Hey class, welcome to week 13. We are definitely closing in on the end of the semester. 13, 14, and 15 will close us out. And then you're going to want to pay attention to due dates in terms of the research paper and the final exam. All right, this week we're going to be discussing art and culture, as well as people on the move, migration, immigration, emigration, and topics around those areas. So in terms of art and culture, you should know that there are what we call visual anthropologists who tend to focus on art and culture. It is an aspect of culture that anthropologists are going to analyze, but and there's also ethnomusicologists. So there's some subfields within this area, and they really become specialized on specific topics. There are ethnographers who do ethnographies on individuals who are graffiti artists, who are mural artists in different locations. So it's going to be a vast, kind of diverse area of anthropology in terms of art, music, sculpture, those kinds of things. So in terms of a definition, art is the application of imagination, skill and style to matter, movement, and sound. So movement goes with dance and theater, and it goes beyond what is purely practical. Again, outside of the practicality realm, art a lot of times does not serve kind of a material function. It serves more of a imaginatory function. And I think that sometimes those can kind of meld in together in terms of material function. It may be that just looking at a piece of art calms us down, so that's a stress reliever. So then is that material or is it not? So kind of fascinating things around art. In terms of like history, we really start to get into human kind of cave art and music explosion around 60,000 years ago. We call that the cognitive revolution, which is really where anatomically modern humans kind of come about. Ethnoaesthetics is that cultures define what art is. And this could be use of color, it could be use of space, it could be use of movement, dance, all of those things. And this is where we're going to get a lot of diversity. Western Europe kind of focused in on art being 2D painting maybe, and different cultures are going to use art in different ways. Native American groups are going to use pictographs and petroglyphs to convey art. A lot of times it's shamanistic art. So again, there's different mediums. There's also kind of different materials that are used in terms of oil, ochre, minerals, rock, canvas. All of those things start to play into it. But again, cultures are going to define these things. They're also going to define kind of what music we play, what dances are appropriate. Again, everything is kind of enveloped in that cultural apparatus. Expressive art, behaviors and beliefs related to art, leisure, and play. So expressive art could be playing sports. This is body movement stuff. Dance would kind of be in here as well. Leisure and play, we're going to start to even get into like tourism and where that fits into art, imagination, outside of practicality, those kinds of things. And then looking at the difference between different culture groups and their aesthetic standards. So each culture group is going to define what is aesthetically pleasing to them or not. And this is an area where we actually see a lot of ethnocentrism as well. Somebody might see graffiti and kind of write it off as not good art or something else, but really a lot of times graffiti tells a story. So again, trying not to be ethnocentric, cultural relativity is key when looking at other culture groups' art. Art and functionalism. So Boas preached the importance of studying art. Functionalists believe that art, paintings, dance, song, and theater helped to enculturate children into social groups. So if children watch adults dance or sing or hear stories through song or learn a musical instrument or themselves becoming artists as children, kind of experimenting with wood or whatever that might be, carving. Boaz's real piece here is that actually the functionalistic aspect of it is that art trains the new generation to be kind of in the traditional vein of the older generation. Boaz urges anthropologists to study the artists. He really wants people to go in and look at artist status, design, and specialization. This is coming out of some ideas around aesthetics and kind of moving into the upper level, which is looking at art, analyzing art, and then looking at the actual artist who produced the art, their social situation, the story behind that art in terms of the artist's life. Those are the bigger kind of cultural concepts of what we're going for. Where does the art fit into the visual representation of the culture at the time? But really, again, we're really getting into people, right? Which is the artists themselves. Art does provide a sense of identity, group boundaries, and promotes healing. So these are all kind of functional aspects of art as well. Art is a social control. African masks worn to symbolize deities to remind cultural agents of moral order. This is a specific group in Africa that they wear the mask, and it basically reminds all the tribal members that there is an order, and that these masks symbolize that order of behaving and remembering kind of to honor the ancestors and those kinds of things. Some of the other fascinating things in your textbook that come up are things like building rapport, building trust through music and or dance. I think I talked about this with food. If you were going in and you were studying a group of people and you basically wouldn't eat their food, you're out. They're not going to give you a bunch of information. Same is true for music and dance. If these are seen as kind of cultural human universals. So if you went into a group and basically said, no, I'm not gonna dance, or I'm not gonna play music, or I'm not gonna sing. Again, you're gonna start to remove yourself from that rapport building. Your book has a great story about Chernoff, who goes into Ghana and tries to learn the drums. He goes through this like social ridicule with the group that he's trying to get information from. He's really bad at it at the beginning. They tell him to go off on some spirit quests and come back and get better. And he eventually, he does. He actually gets in with the group and is able to drum with them. But drumming was so connected to daily life and your status and how you fit into that group that if you didn't master it, you just wouldn't be accepted. So again, this is like such a heavy musical culture. Great story. So if you're looking into the textbook, I don't refer to Barbara Miller's textbook that often. However, I think this Chernoff story is quite fascinating. It's a good one. Performance art and theater. Ethnomusicology, again, is music within culture groups. Also looking at the players of that music, their social position of musicians, music's interplay into the culture, such as religion. This also has a big tie-in. A lot of times music and art are tied into religion, which is what I have you watch. There's a presentation on Korean art, shamanistic art, and how that plays into kind of Korean everyday superstition and belief structures. Quite fascinating. And that interplay is a lot of times there, as well as the pictographs and petroglyphs as well. A lot of religious kind of symbolism there. One of my old professors was an ethnomusicologist. He studied the sitar in India in the 60s, so kind of right around the same time period as the Beatles would have been there. Fascinating. And again, I would say that ethnomusicology, if you do have a musical kind of talent, this is one of those areas that I would say, along with linguistics, is kind of lacking in terms of the field. I don't hear a lot of people going into this field of study, and really, we probably need more of it because, like language, a lot of these groups, as they become Westernized or Easternized, again, it could be that they're learning, pop music from America and K-pop from Korea. This is going to change their musical. Once you hear that music, it's going to change how you interpret music and how you play it. So these groups that have kind of their own indigenous music styles, whether it be drums or flute or string instruments or whatever that is, This is an area where it is easier to build rapport if you have some knowledge of music. Music and gender also plays in terms of who can play what instruments, who can sing. A lot of times culture groups have rules around these things. Theater is a type of enactment that seeks to entertain through movement, words related to dance, music, parades, competitive games, sports, and verbal art. So again, a lot of times, this is kabuki theater that I have a picture of. Sumo is more of a competitive performance art, to be honest. It's kind of ritualized and structured in that way. But if we start to expand out our ideas of art and body and movement, then we realize that a lot of these things in terms of our sports, right, like baseball and tennis and golf and all of those things, there's a certain level of art to those. And a lot of times it is in the human movement. But it could also be in the uniforms. It could be in the iconography. It could be in face decorating. I mean, there's a lot of art all over the place. We just have to analyze it from an anthropological perspective. Connections between myth, ritual, and performance. These are huge too. Again, a lot of times groups believe that dance, and it could be sun dance, a rain dance, a world renewal dance. A lot of these come about. These things, like the belief structure here is that if we move in a certain way and we do a dance in a certain way and we all do it, that we can actually start to control the supernatural around dance. So this fits in well with the religious conversation that we had last week in terms of kind of contagious magic, and then moving on to like prayer as kind of a form of magic, but also the idea that movement and dance can also be this form of magic that then has some mythical kind of background to it that then can create and impact weather and stuff like that. So again, performance, movement, this all relates back to the idea of control to a certain degree, right? It's humans' idea that if I do this, then I will get this. It's this form of control. And really, we don't get a ton of that until we start to move more into agriculture and some of these other things, tool making. So architecture and decorative arts, I would say that reflects and protects social rank, right? So a lot of times architecture has some of these things, class difference, gender, age, and ethnic differences. Architecture and even design of villages is hugely reminiscent of, or has a huge connection on hierarchy and social status and what that looks like. So if you have a big giant house in the middle of town, we could assume that that is an elite leader and has huge status. And this is really what we've seen throughout history in terms of civilization. If we don't have that and we have groups kind of around a fire, then we have more of an egalitarian structure. And a lot of that is, like if the fire is at the center of the village and the houses are around that, you basically have more of a community or egalitarian. If the chief's house or the chief's hut or house is in the center of the village and everybody's around that, that is symbolic, and the power is in that individual. So a lot of times social rank gets involved with architecture, whether that be materials used, how big, where it's placed, all of those things play in here. Class differences, gender, age, and ethnic differences also play into architecture. A lot of times we see more rounded buildings from female kind of architects, and more square grid pattern-like rectangles out of male architects. And that's a fascinating kind of correlation. I don't think that it is a universal, and it is necessarily like kind of one size fits all structure. But if you analyze different, I know that in Dongdaemun in Korea, there's this famous architect who's she's a female architect, and everything is very rounded and kind of space age looking. So pay attention to kind of who's building, who's creating, where things are located, and how those things are kind of organized. Gardens and outside space also may reflect rank and personal taste. So this could be aesthetics on a personal level, but it can also tell us if we have really manicured lawns, if we have manicured plants and stuff like that, they could also give us some social rank as well.